Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Tonight, we are diving deep into the world of the gig economy, specifically the drivers who bring you your midnight snacks. We trust these apps to keep us safe, and we trust the people on the other end to just be hungry customers. But sometimes, that trust is misplaced. Tonight, we will hear stories of drivers who went to the wrong house, the wrong warehouse, or just met the wrong people. Before we get started, I want you to go down to the comments section right now. Tell me what time it is where you are watching from, and tell me what city you are in. Let's see who is up late tonight. This happened last year in rural Texas, about an hour outside of Austin. I was working for Grubhub. It was a Saturday night, and I was bored, so I decided to pick up a shift. I got an order for a barbecue place. A big family platter, ribs, brisket, sides. The payout was decent, and the drop-off was about 20 minutes away. I picked up the food. It smelled amazing, making my mouth water the whole drive. The destination was out in the farmlands, which wasn't unusual. People out there order delivery all the time because they don't want to drive into town. I was cruising down a 2-lane highway when my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Unknown." I usually don't answer those, but I thought it might be the customer. "Hello?" I answered. "You're going the wrong way," a male voice said. It sounded digital, like the connection was bad or he was using a voice changer. I looked at my GPS. The map says I just need to keep straight for another 5 miles. "The map is wrong," the voice said. "The bridge is out ahead. You need to turn right at the next dirt road. Takes you right to my back door." "Oh, okay. Thanks for the heads up." I hung up. It made sense. Construction happens all the time. I saw the dirt road coming up on the right. I slowed down and turned onto it. It was a narrow track, barely wide enough for my truck. Tall stalks of corn lined both sides, pressing in close. I drove for about 10 minutes. The road seemed to go on forever. I started to get nervous. There were no lights, no signs, just corn. Finally, the road opened up into a clearing. There was a single small farmhouse sitting there. It looked dark. There was a for sale sign specifically planted in the front yard, but it was knocked over in the tall grass. I parked the truck. My headlights washed over the peeling white paint of the house. It looked like nobody had lived there for a decade. The windows were dirty, and the porch sagged in the middle. I grabbed a heavy bag of BBQ and stepped out. The cornfields rustled around me in the wind. It was the only sound out there. "Hello?" I called out. The front door creaked open a few inches. I couldn't see a face, but I saw a hand stick out and wave me in. It was a frantic wave, like they were hurrying me up. "Just come inside," a voice yelled from deep within the house. "I'm in the kitchen." It was the same man from the phone. I walked up the rotting wooden steps. I really didn't want to go inside a stranger's house, especially one that looked like this. But I just wanted to drop the food and get back to the main road. I pushed the door open with my foot. The air inside was stale. It smelled like wet cardboard and old dust. There was no furniture in the living room, just a stained carpet and an old fireplace filled with trash. "In the kitchen," the voice shouted again. "Put it on the counter." I'm washing my hands. I heard the faucet squeak on. The sound of rushing water echoed through the empty house. I walked down the short hallway. My boots crunched on broken glass scattered on the floor. "All right, I'm coming," I said. I reached the kitchen doorway. The light from the hallway fixture was flickering, casting long, jumping shadows. I stepped into the room. "Here is your," I froze. The kitchen was empty. The sink was running full blast. The water was overflowing the metal basin and spilling onto the dirty linoleum floor. But there was nobody standing there. There was no back door in the kitchen. There was no other way out of the room except the way I came in. Someone had turned that sink on 3 seconds ago. I heard them. But they were gone. Then I noticed the counter. It was covered in dust, except for one clean square patch where a laptop had been sitting recently. And next to the sink, there was a sleeping bag rolled up tight. A cold feeling washed over me. This wasn't a customer's home. This was a trap. "Hello?" I whispered, backing up. From the hallway behind me, the empty hallway I had just walked through, I heard a floorboard creak. I didn't turn around to look. I didn't ask who was there. I dropped the $60 worth of BBQ right onto the floor. I spun around and sprinted. As I ran back through the living room, a man lunged from the shadows of the coat closet. He grabbed the back of my shirt. I screamed and threw my weight forward. The fabric ripped and I stumbled onto the porch. I scrambled to my feet and jumped off the steps, landing hard in the dirt. I ran to my truck, fumbling for the door handle. I looked back at the house. The man was standing in the doorway. He wasn't chasing me anymore. He was holding a phone up to his ear. My phone started ringing in my pocket. I jumped in the truck, locked the doors, and tore out of there. I reversed down that cornfield road so fast I took out a few stalks. When I finally got back to the main highway, I pulled over at a gas station to breathe. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I pulled my phone out. I had 15 missed calls from that unknown number. I also had 5 text messages from Grubhub support and the real customer. The texts read, "Hey, the map shows you going the opposite direction. Are you lost? And why did you turn off the highway?" That is when it hit me. The guy in the house wasn't the customer. He had somehow hacked into the signal or intercepted the data. He knew exactly where I was. He knew I was a driver, and he called me to lure me to that specific abandoned farmhouse. I called the police. They met me at the gas station. When I told the officer about the phone call and the map, he went pale. He told me that tech-savvy squatters have been using scanners to find delivery drivers in rural areas. They lure them to abandoned properties to rob them of their vehicles and cash. But the way this guy tried to grab me, the officer said it looked like he wanted more than just my truck. They went to the farmhouse that night. The man was gone. He had taken his sleeping bag and his laptop. The only thing left was the bag of BBQ on the floor and the water still running in the sink. I stopped driving for delivery apps after that. It is terrifying to think that someone can watch your location, call your phone, and guide you into a trap, all while you think you are just doing your job. Stay safe out there, and if the GPS says go straight, don't listen to the voice telling you to turn into the cornfields. This happened in 2021. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, working as a delivery driver for Papa John's. It was a hot summer, and even at night, the temperature was hovering around 90 degrees. It was a slow Tuesday night. I was in the back of the shop, helping the manager, Dave, stack boxes. The front bell chimed, meaning a customer had walked in. Dave went to the front to help them. I could hear the conversation from the back. The guy's voice was slurred, like he was drunk or high on something. "I want a medium pepperoni," the man said, "but I want it delivered." "Sir, you're here right now," Dave said. "We can make it in 10 minutes and you can take it with you." "No," the man insisted. "I want it delivered to this address." I peeked around the corner. The guy was white, maybe 30 years old, wearing a black hoodie with the hood up, which was weird because it was 90 degrees outside. He looked sweaty and agitated. He handed Dave a crumpled piece of paper with an address on it, paid with a wad of crumpled cash, and then walked out without waiting for a receipt. "Freaking weirdo," Dave muttered as he walked back to the kitchen. "Who comes to the store to order delivery to their own house? Maybe he's too drunk to drive and realized it?" I suggested. "Maybe," Dave said. "Anyway, it's your run, Jake. It's about 10 minutes away." I made the pizza, boxed it up, and headed to my car. It was a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better days. As I pulled out of the strip mall parking lot, I noticed a car pull out right behind me. It was a gray sedan with a smashed headlight. I drove down the main boulevard. The gray sedan stayed right on my bumper. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I slowed down. It slowed down. At first, I thought it was just an aggressive driver. Phoenix drivers are notoriously bad. But then I turned into the residential neighborhood where the delivery was, and the car followed me. I made a random left turn just to see if he would follow, and sure enough, the gray sedan turned left too. My heart started racing. I was being followed. I navigated back to the correct street. The address was for a house at the end of a cul-de-sac. I pulled up to the curb. The gray sedan didn't pull into the cul-de-sac. Instead, it stopped at the corner, about 4 houses down, and turned its lights off. I sat in my car for a minute. This felt like a setup. But I needed the job, and I told myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe the guy lived on the corner and was just parking. I grabbed the pizza and walked up the driveway. The house was dark, no porch light. I knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I waited. I could hear crickets chirping. The air was thick and hot. Finally, the door opened. A man stood there, but it wasn't the guy from the shop. This guy was older, heavier, and looked extremely confused. He was rubbing his eyes like he had just woken up. Pizza for, I looked at the receipt. It didn't have a name, just the address. Pizza delivery? The man stared at me. His eyes were wide, dilated. He looked like he was on something too. He didn't speak. He just stared at the box, then at me. "Did you order this?" I asked. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Yeah, sure." He reached out for the box. His movements were slow and jerky. I handed him the pizza. He took it with one hand and reached into his pocket with the other. I thought he was grabbing a tip. That's when I heard the whistle. It came from the bush to my right. A sharp, 2-note whistle. I spun around. Sprinting across the lawn toward me was the guy from the shop, the one in the black hoodie. He was holding something in his hand. It looked like a tire iron, and from the corner of the street, the gray sedan roared to life. Its headlights flicked on, blindingly bright. It screeched tires as it sped toward the driveway, trying to block my car in. "Get him!" The hoodie guy screamed. The man at the door, the confused one, suddenly dropped the pizza box. He lunged at me, grabbing my shirt. I reacted on pure instinct. I slammed my elbow back into the guy's face. I felt his nose crunch. He let go, stumbling back into his house. I turned and ran. The guy with the tire iron was only 10 feet away. I didn't have time to get to my door. I vaulted over the hood of my Civic, sliding across the metal. I scrambled to the driver's side door, ripped it open, and dove inside. The tire iron smashed into my rear window, shattering the glass. Crash! I jammed the key in the ignition and started the car. The gray sedan had pulled up perpendicular to my bumper, blocking me from backing out. I threw the car into drive instead of reverse. I stomped on the gas. My Civic jumped the curb, ran over the neighbor's pristine flower bed, and tore across their lawn. I bounced back onto the street, bypassing the blockade entirely. I looked in my rearview mirror. The 2 men were standing in the street, screaming at me. The gray sedan was trying to make a 3-point turn to chase me, but I was already gone. I sped until I found a gas station with bright lights and people. I called 911. The police arrested 2 men that night. It turned out they were brothers. They had a long record of armed robbery. Their plan was simple but terrifying. One would place the order in the store so the driver wouldn't suspect anything, while the other waited at the house to ambush the driver. They used a random house where they knew the owners were on vacation, broke in, and waited. If I hadn't jumped that curb, if I had been 2 seconds slower getting into my car, I would have been beaten and robbed, or worse. I quit delivering pizzas immediately. I work in a warehouse now. It's boring, hard work, but at least nobody is waiting in the bushes with a tire iron to kill me. My name is Liam. I grew up in upstate New York, in a town surrounded by dense forests and winding mountain roads. In 2023, I was 18 and working for a local place called Tony's Pizza. It was a Friday night, and I was closing. It was around 11:30 p.m. My manager, Tony, and I were the only ones left. Another driver, Mark, had just clocked out. I was sweeping the floor when the phone rang. An elderly man's voice was on the line. He sounded sweet, almost frail. "Are you boys still delivering?" he asked. "Yeah, we go until midnight," I said. "Oh, wonderful. I just like a large cheese pizza. My wife is sick, and we don't have anything to cook." I took down the address. It was about 12 miles away, deep in the woods off an old logging road. I knew the area. It was isolated, but people lived out there. I baked the pie, boxed it, and headed out. The drive was peaceful at first. I had my windows down, listening to a podcast. But as I turned onto the main highway leading out of town, I noticed a black pickup truck waiting at a stop sign. I passed the truck, and it immediately pulled out behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then the truck started acting weird. It would speed up right onto my bumper, flashing its brights, and then slam on its brakes and drop back 10 car lengths. I watched him in my rearview mirror. "Jerk," I muttered. I turned onto the narrow, winding road that led to the delivery address. To my relief, the truck kept going straight on the highway. I was alone again. I followed the GPS until I found the driveway. It was a long, single-lane gravel path lined with tall pine trees. It was like driving into a tunnel of darkness. I drove for about a quarter mile until I reached the house. It was a small, well-kept cottage. I grabbed the pizza and walked to the door. An older woman answered. She looked confused. "Hello?" she said. "Pizza for, the gentleman of the house?" I asked. "My husband died 4 years ago, son," she said softly. I didn't order any pizza. My stomach dropped. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am. I must have the wrong address." She looked at me with pity. "You drive safe now. It's dark out there." I walked back to my car, feeling uneasy. This was a prank. Some kids probably looked up a random address and sent me out here for laughs. It happens sometimes. I got in my car and started driving back down the long gravel driveway. I just wanted to get back to the shop and go home. I was about halfway down the driveway when suddenly the woods around me lit up with blinding white light. A vehicle was sitting in the middle of the driveway, facing me. It had huge LED floodlights mounted on top, and they were aimed right at my windshield. I slammed on the brakes. I couldn't see anything past the lights. I honked my horn. "Hey, move!" I yelled inside my car. The lights didn't move. I waited for 10 seconds, then 20. Finally, the floodlights turned off. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the sudden darkness. When they did, I saw the silhouette of the black pickup truck from earlier. It was parked horizontally across the driveway, completely blocking my exit. I was trapped. The driveway was lined with a deep drainage ditch on both sides. I couldn't go around. The driver's door of the truck opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing a mask, a simple white plastic mask like you'd buy at a craft store. He started walking toward my car. He wasn't rushing. He was walking slowly, casually. About halfway to my car, he stopped and waved at me. A slow, taunting wave. I locked my doors. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I put the car in reverse. Maybe I could go back to the old lady's house? But as I looked in my rearview mirror to back up, I saw movement behind me. 3 men emerged from the trees behind my car. They were all wearing the same white masks. They were holding baseball bats. I was surrounded. 1 in front, 3 behind. The man in front started walking again. He pulled a knife out of his belt. The blade glinted in my headlights. I didn't think. I just reacted. I shifted my car into drive. I looked at the ditch on the right side of the driveway. It was deep, but maybe, just maybe, I floored it. I didn't aim for the truck. I aimed for the gap between the truck's bumper and the trees. My car plunged into the ditch. The suspension screamed. Mud and rocks flew everywhere. The car tipped dangerously, almost rolling over, but the momentum carried me. I bounced violently, my head slamming against the roof, and then the car clawed its way up the other side of the ditch, bypassing the truck. I heard a loud thump as one of the men threw something at my car, denting the rear door. I didn't stop. I tore down the rest of the driveway, hitting the paved road at 40 miles an hour. I drove like a maniac all the way back to town. I called the police from the safety of the pizza shop parking lot. The police set up a roadblock. They actually caught 3 of them. They were local guys, all in their 20s, high on meth. They had been doing this for weeks, calling in fake orders to isolated houses, waiting for the driver to get stuck in the driveway, and then robbing them of their car and cash. The 4th guy, the one who ran out of the trees, escaped into the woods. They never found him. I still have nightmares about that white mask glowing in my headlights. I don't drive at night anymore. It's not worth the risk. I was a junior at UCLA in 2022. Living in Los Angeles is expensive, so I spent my nights driving for Postmates to pay for textbooks and groceries. I usually stuck to the Westwood area, delivering boba tea and burritos to other students. One Wednesday night, around 1 a.m., I was about to log off. I was parked near campus, scrolling through Instagram, when a request popped up. It was a delivery from a 7-Eleven. A single bag of flamin' hot Cheetos and a Red Bull. The distance was 12 miles, taking me up into the Hollywood Hills. Usually, I would decline that instantly. 12 miles for a snack run? No way. But then I saw the payout, $75. I stared at the screen. The base pay was low, but the tip was massive. Someone had pre-tipped like $65. I figured it was some rich kid partying in a mansion who really wanted snacks and didn't care about the cost. I accepted it. I picked up the snacks and started the drive up into the hills. If you know the Hollywood Hills, you know the roads are narrow, winding, and dark. The houses are incredible, huge multi-million-dollar estates hidden behind tall gates and hedges. I followed the GPS higher and higher. The cell service was spotty. Finally, I reached the street. It was a dead-end road at the very top of a hill. I drove slowly, looking for the address. The map said I was there, but I was confused. To my left was a massive modern mansion with a 12-foot gate. To my right was another estate with a stone wall. The GPS dot was hovering right in the middle, in a small gap between the two properties. I slowed to a crawl. Between the two mega mansions, there was a narrow, overgrown dirt driveway. It didn't look like it belonged there. At the end of the dirt path, about 50 yards back, was a small, dilapidated structure. It looked like an old maintenance shed or a detached garage that had been forgotten. I checked the app. The customer, John, sent a message. Don't go to the main houses. Come to the shed in the middle. I'm waiting. This was weird. Why would a guy with $75 to tip be living in a shed between two mansions? I parked my car on the street. I wasn't going to drive my Prius down that dirt path. I'd get stuck. I grabbed the small 7-Eleven bag and walked up the driveway. It was pitch black. The motion sensor lights from the mansions on either side didn't reach this narrow strip of land. As I got closer, I saw the shed. It was wooden, rotting, with a sagging roof. The door was a sliding garage style, but it was rusted shut. "Hello?" I called out. "Postmates." From behind the shed, a voice answered. "Over here." It wasn't a kid. It was a deep, gravelly voice. I stopped walking. I was about 10 feet from the corner of the shed. "I'm just going to leave the food by the front door here," I said, placing the bag on an old tree stump. "No," the voice said. It was sharper now. "Bring it around back. The front door is jammed. I'm in a wheelchair. I can't come get it." I hesitated. A wheelchair? The ground here was dirt and roots. There was no way a wheelchair could move around back there. And if he was stuck, how did he get back there in the dark? "Sir, I can't come around back. I'll leave it here." I took my phone out to take the proof of delivery photo. The flash went off. In the split second of the flash, I saw something. Peeking out from around the back corner of the shed was a man. He was standing up. He was definitely not in a wheelchair. He was wearing a dark rain slicker and gloves. And he was holding a length of rope. He ducked back immediately when the flash hit him. "Bring it here," he yelled, his voice angry now. "Just do your job." My fight or flight kicked in hard. I didn't say another word. I turned and ran back down the dirt path. I didn't care about the noise I was making. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and locked the doors. As I peeled away, I saw him run out to the street. He stood there under the street lamp, watching me go. He looked furious. He picked up a rock and threw it at my car, but he missed. I drove back to civilization and called support to report the customer. A week later, I saw a news story. Police had raided that shed. It turned out it was a squatter's den. The man had been living there illegally between the two properties for months. They found stolen goods, weapons, and evidence that he had been robbing delivery drivers. He used a high tip to bait people into coming all the way out there, knowing they wouldn't turn down the money. I never delivered to side structures anymore. If you aren't at the front door with the lights on, you aren't getting your Cheetos. I started driving for Uber Eats back in early 2023. I was living in Seattle at the time, and the rent prices were absolutely out of control. I was a student at the University of Washington, and my part-time job at the campus bookstore just wasn't cutting it anymore. I needed cash, and I needed it fast. I signed up because the ads made it look so easy. You just drive around, listen to your own music, drop off some burgers, and get paid. For the first month, that is exactly how it was. I actually kind of enjoyed it. It was peaceful driving around the city at night when the traffic died down. I eventually quit the bookstore job entirely. I started driving full-time during the summer break. I would wake up in the afternoon, study or hang out, and then start my shift around 6 p.m. I would usually drive until 3 or 4 in the morning because that is when the surges were the highest. Drunk people leaving bars and night shift workers always tipped the best. I was making good money, and I felt like I had hacked a system. That all changed on a Tuesday night in July. It was a weird night to begin with. The fog had rolled in off the water, and it was thick. It was one of those nights where the streetlights just create these glowing orbs in the mist, and you can't see more than 50 feet in front of your car. I was about to call it a night around 2 a.m., but then I got a notification for a really high-paying order. It was a pickup from a 24-hour Jack-in-the-Box, going to an address about 15 minutes away in the industrial district south of the stadium. I accepted it because the payout was $30 for a single delivery. That is huge. I figured it was a large group order for a night crew at a factory or something. I pulled up to the drive-thru, got the 2 massive bags of food, and started heading south. The drive took me out of the city center and into the warehouse district. If you have never been there at night, it is a ghost town. It is just block after block of massive concrete buildings, shipping containers, and chain-link fences. There are no houses, no gas stations, just industry. The roads are full of potholes from all the semi-trucks. I followed the GPS until it told me to turn right into a massive lot. The destination was a giant gray building that looked like it hadn't been painted in 40 years. The parking lot was enormous and completely empty except for 2 trailer beds detached from their trucks sitting in the far corner. There were no cars near the building. No security guard booth. Nothing. I checked the delivery notes on my phone. It read, side entrance, gray metal door. Bring inside to front desk. I really hate entering buildings. I'd prefer to just leave it at the door or hand it through my car window. But for $30, I figured I could walk an extra 50 feet. I drove my car around the perimeter of the building until I saw a lone gray metal door on the east side. There was a single dim yellow light bulb buzzing above it. It was the only light on the entire side of the warehouse. I parked my car, grabbed the 2 bags, and locked my doors. The air was cold and damp from the fog. It was dead silent. Usually, in these industrial areas, you can hear the hum of machinery or generators, but this place was totally quiet. I walked up to the door and pulled the handle. It was heavy, solid steel. It groaned as I pulled it open. I expected to walk into a security office or a break room with people eating lunch. Instead, I was looking into a long, dark hallway. The only light came from the open door behind me and a tiny red exit sign way down at the other end of the corridor. The floor was concrete, and the walls were bare cinder blocks. It smelled like old oil and stagnant water. "Hello?" "Uber Eats," I called out. My voice echoed down the hall, bouncing off the concrete walls. Nobody answered. I took a few steps inside, letting the heavy door close slowly behind me. But I caught it with my foot before it could latch shut. Something in my gut told me not to let that door lock. I propped it open slightly with a loose brick that was sitting on the ground nearby. I walked about 10 feet down the hallway. It was so dark, I had to pull out my phone and turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dusty air. To my left, there was an empty office with a glass window. I shined my light in there. Just an empty desk and a chair. No computer, no papers. "Is anyone here?" I yelled again, louder this time. Still nothing. Just silence. I looked at my phone again to make sure I was at the right place. The address matched. The instructions were specific, but it felt wrong. If this was an active shift, where were the cars? Where was the noise? I decided I wasn't going to walk all the way down to the end of the hall to find a front desk that might not even exist. I was going to leave the food on the floor, take a picture, and leave. As I was setting the bags down on the cold concrete, I decided to call the customer through the app, just to let them know their food was there. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear. The ringing started on my end. Ring, ring, and then I heard it. From deep down the dog hallway, way past where my flashlight could reach, a phone started ringing. It was a standard iPhone marimba ringtone. It echoed perfectly down the empty corridor. I froze. I stared into the blackness at the end of the hall. Ding, 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 ding. It rang again. It sounded like it was on the floor, maybe 100 feet away. "Hello?" I shouted. "I can hear your phone. I'm leaving the food right here." The ringing stopped. The call went to voicemail. I hung up. I waited for a voice, for someone to say, "Okay, thanks," or "I'm coming." Instead, I heard a scuffing sound, like the sole of a heavy boot dragging against concrete. Scrape. Then again. Scrape. Step. Scrape. Step. Someone was walking toward me from the darkness. I pointed my flashlight down the hall. The beam shook because my hand was trembling. At first, I couldn't see anything but dust motes floating in the light. Then, a figure stepped into the edge of the light beam. It was a man. He was huge, probably 6'5". He was wearing dirty dark clothes, like a mechanic's jumpsuit that was covered in grease. But the scary part was his face. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking slightly above me. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, and he was moving fast. He wasn't running, but he was speed walking with these long, aggressive strides. He didn't say a word. He didn't wave. He just marched toward me with this blank, terrifying expression. "I'm leaving the food," I yelled, my voice cracking. He didn't stop. He was maybe 40 feet away now, 30 feet. Panic took over. I dropped the bags of food right there on the floor. I spun around and kicked the brick away from the door. I grabbed the handle and threw myself outside into the cool night air. I sprinted to my car. I didn't even look back. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them on the driver's seat, picked them up, and jammed the key into the ignition. I locked the doors immediately. As I threw the car into reverse, I looked at the metal door. Through the small reinforced glass window on the door, I saw a face press up against it. He was just watching me. He didn't try to open the door. He just stood there, staring, his breath fogging up the glass. I peeled out of that parking lot so fast I almost spun out on the gravel. I drove at 90 miles an hour back to the highway. I didn't stop shaking until I was back near the University District with lights and people around. I called the police immediately. I told them everything. The empty warehouse, the phone ringing in the dark, the man chasing me. 2 days later, a detective called me back. He asked me for more details about the man's appearance. I told him what I saw. Then he told me what they found. Police went to the warehouse that night. The building had been abandoned for 3 years. It wasn't a functioning business. When they went inside, they found the bags of Jack in the Box right where I left them. But further down the hall, where the man had come from, they found a sleeping bag, a pile of prepaid burner phones, and a collection of driver's licenses. The licenses belonged to 3 other delivery drivers who had gone missing over the last month. They never caught the guy. He slipped out the back before the cops arrived. But the detective told me that if I had walked down that hallway, or if I had waited 5 more seconds for him to reach me, I probably would have been just another ID card in his collection. I quit Uber Eats that night, and I haven't delivered a single meal since. My name is Sarah, and in 2022, I was living in a very small town in rural Ohio. When I say small, I mean we had 1 stoplight and a lot of cornfields. My best friend since kindergarten was a girl named Jessica. Her parents, the Russos, owned the only Italian restaurant in town. It was called Sal's Pizza. Since it was a family business, they were always short-staffed. Jessica begged me to come work for them during our senior year of high school. She said we would get to hang out all the time. I needed gas money for my Jeep, so I agreed. The problem was, working for your best friend's parents is awful. Mr. Russo was strict. He treated me like I was his daughter, which meant he felt comfortable yelling at me if I was 2 minutes late or if I folded a pizza box wrong. Even worse, he never scheduled Jessica and me on the same shifts. I was usually stuck driving deliveries on the weekends, while Jessica worked the front counter on weekdays. It was a rainy Saturday night in October. The rush had ended around 8 p.m., and I was just standing around the kitchen, folding boxes and checking my phone. I was scheduled to leave at 9 p.m. At 8:45 p.m., the phone rang. Mr. Russo picked it up. I watched him scribble down an order on the notepad. He hung up and looked at me. "One last run, Sarah," he said, ripping the paper off the pad. I looked at the address. "Mr. Russo, this is way out on County Road 9. That's like a 30-minute drive. I'm supposed to be off in 15 minutes. Don't complain," he grumbled. "It's money, large pepperoni and a side of garlic knots. Get going." I was annoyed, but I didn't want to argue. I grabbed the insulated bag and walked out to my Jeep. The rain was coming down hard now, turning the dirt roads into mud. The drive was miserable. Once you leave the main town, the streetlights disappear. It is just pitch black, endless fields on both sides, and the occasional farmhouse. My cell service dropped to 1 bar, then to no service as I got further out. I tried to listen to the radio, but even that was static. I followed the directions I had typed into my GPS before I lost signal. I turned onto a gravel driveway that was almost hidden by overgrown bushes. The driveway was long, winding through a patch of woods. When the house finally came into view, my stomach dropped. It was a massive, old Victorian-style house. It looked like it had been white once, but the paint was peeling off in long strips, revealing gray wood underneath. There were no lights on. Not a porch light, not a window light. It looked completely abandoned. I checked the clock. 9:20 p.m. I pulled up right to the front porch and kept my headlights on so I could see. I grabbed the pizza bag and ran through the rain to the porch. I rang the doorbell. I didn't hear a chime inside. I waited a minute. Nothing. I knocked on the heavy wooden door. Bang, bang, bang. Pizza delivery. I yelled. I stood there shivering in the cold, damp air. I looked around the yard. The grass was waist-high. There were old, rusted car parts scattered in the weeds. This place definitely didn't look lived in. I was about to turn around and leave when I saw a beam of light moving inside the house. It was coming from the second floor. The light swept across a window, then disappeared. A minute later, I saw the light on the first floor, moving through the hallway toward the door. The door creaked open. Standing there was a young man, maybe in his early 20s. He looked awful. His face was gaunt, his eyes were sunken with dark circles, and he was wearing a stained white t-shirt and jeans that looked too big for him. He was holding a large, heavy-duty flashlight in his hand. He didn't turn on any house lights. He just shined the flashlight right in my face, blinding me for a second. "Pizza?" he asked. His voice was raspy. "Yeah," I said, shielding my eyes. "That will be $24.50. He didn't move to get his wallet. He just stood there, blocking the doorway. He gestured with the flashlight into the house behind him. "I have the money on the kitchen table," he said. "My hands are full. Can you just bring it in and set it on the table for me?" I looked at his hands. In his right hand, he had the flashlight. His left hand was empty. "Your hands aren't full," I said, taking a step back. He looked at his empty left hand, then looked back at me. He didn't seem embarrassed or caught in a lie. He just stared. "Please," he said, "just bring it inside. The kitchen is right down the hall." I looked past him into the house. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the hallway. I could see that the floor was covered in dust. There was a couch in the living room, but it was covered with a white sheet. There were no pictures on the walls, no shoes by the door. This was a vacant house. "I can't come inside," I said firmly. "Store policy. You have to pay out here." He took a step onto the porch. He was tall, much taller than me. He lowered the flashlight so it wasn't in my eyes anymore, but now it was illuminating his legs. I saw that he was wearing muddy boots. "I really need you to come inside, Sarah," he said. My blood ran cold. I was not wearing a name tag. I had never told him my name. And Sal's Pizza didn't have a tracker app that told you who your driver was. "How do you know my name?" I whispered. He smiled, and it was the creepiest thing I have ever seen. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predatory baring of teeth. "I've seen you at the shop," he said. He took another step toward me. "Come inside. It's warm." I didn't wait another second. I threw the pizza bag at his chest. He stumbled back as the hot box hit him. I turned and sprinted to my Jeep. I jumped in and locked the doors. I looked out the window. He was standing on the edge of the porch, just watching me. He raised the flashlight and waved it slowly back and forth. I reversed down that long, winding driveway faster than I have ever driven in my life. I almost put the Jeep in a ditch twice. When I got back to the main road, I drove straight to the police station instead of the pizza shop. I told the officer everything. They sent a patrol car out there about an hour later. When they got there, the house was empty. The pizza was smashed on the porch where I had thrown it. They checked the records. The house had been foreclosed on 2 years ago and had been sitting empty ever since. But here is the worst part. When the police searched the house, they found a sleeping bag in the closet of the master bedroom. And taped to the wall inside the closet were dozens of photos. They were photos of me walking into school, photos of me pumping gas, and photos of me working at the pizza shop counter. This guy hadn't just ordered a pizza. He had been stalking me. He knew my schedule. He knew where I worked, and he lured me to an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere on a night when he knew I would be the one driving. I quit my job the next day. I changed my phone number. I even moved in with my aunt in the next town over for a few months. They never caught the guy. To this day, every time I see a flashlight beam cut through the dark, I freeze.